I never imagined I would be hosting a retirement party at 42 years old. Not because I didn't work hard enough, not because I lacked ambition, but because retirement was something I had always associated with gray hair, quiet mornings, and decades of stability. Not with champagne flutes, catered canapes, and a room full of people who used to laugh at me behind my back. Yet there I was, standing in the middle of my living room, wearing a dress I had bought just for that night, smiling politely at guests who suddenly remembered my name now that my water purification patent had sold for $20 million in cash, plus royalties that would keep paying long after I stopped working. People kept congratulating me, calling me brilliant, calling me visionary, calling me an inspiration. 6 months ago, those same people wouldn't return my emails. They used to call my work Danielle's expensive hobby, a joke whispered at networking events while I stayed up at 2 a.m, alone in my garage, eating instant noodles and fixing prototypes that kept failing no matter how many times I rebuilt them. Now they were clinking glasses in my house. Life is funny like that. My husband Jason insisted we go all out. A professional caterer, a bartender mixing cocktails with ridiculous names like The Innovator and Silicon Sip. Enough artisanal cheese to bankrupt a small country. He said people expected a speech, something emotional about perseverance, believing in myself when no one else did. I agreed. I was allowed to be generous now, magnanimous, gracious. I could pretend I didn't remember who suggested I get a real job. Everything was perfect until it wasn't. Right before the toast, I walked toward the bar to grab my champagne glass, the same one I'd been using for years. It had a tiny chip on the rim. No one else ever touched it. It was familiar, safe, almost comforting. That's when I saw my husband do something that changed everything. Jason leaned over the bar, glanced around the room like someone checking for security cameras, and pulled a small brown vial from his jacket pocket. Not perfume, not vitamins, not anything normal. It looked like something from an old apothecary or a sketchy website that sells crystals and energy remedies. My heart stuttered. He squeezed several drops into my champagne, swirled it with his finger, then placed the glass back exactly where it had been, as casually as if he'd added a lemon twist. I didn't scream. I didn't confront him. I didn't move. Because when the man you've been married to for 8 years starts seasoning your drink, your instincts don't tell you to panic. They tell you to survive. I smiled, filed the moment away in the part of my brain that remembers passwords and betrayals. The toast began, and that was when I made the decision that would save my life and destroy everything else. Before that night, before the champagne, the vial, the realization that my marriage might actually be lethal, I believed my life made sense. My name is Danielle. I was 42 years old, a chemical engineer by training, an inventor by obsession, and, until very recently, a woman who still believed that love and loyalty were enough to carry a marriage through anything. I met Jason 12 years ago at a technology mixer I almost didn't attend. I had just come off a brutal week at my consulting job, where my male colleagues spoke over me during meetings and then repeated my ideas louder, collecting praise like it was theirs by birthright. I was tired, annoyed, and one passive-aggressive comment away from quitting on the spot. I only went to the event because a friend insisted I needed to get out of my head. Jason was charming in a soft way, not loud, not dominant. He listened, or at least I thought he did. He asked questions about my work and didn't look bored when I explained the early concept behind my purification system. He laughed at my dry jokes. He told me I was brilliant without making it sound like flattery. After years of fighting to be taken seriously, that felt intoxicating. We started dating, slowly. Jason worked in operations management for a mid-sized distribution company. Stable job, predictable income. He wasn't ambitious in the way I was, but I told myself that was a good thing. Balance, I thought. Not everyone needs to chase the impossible. When I told him I wanted to leave consulting and focus on developing my invention full-time, he hesitated. But only for a moment. I believe in you, he said. Someone has to. I held on to that sentence for years. We got married 4 years later, a modest ceremony attended by friends, co-workers, and his family, especially his mother, Patricia, who hugged me too tightly and told everyone how lucky I was to marry into such a close-knit family. At the time, I took it as warmth. Looking back, it was possession. Patricia had opinions about everything. How I dressed, how I spoke, how much time I spent working. She liked to joke that Jason needed a real wife, one who knew how to relax. Jason always brushed it off. "That's just how she is," he'd say. "She means well." I believed him. For the first few years of our marriage, money was tight. My prototypes failed repeatedly. Grants fell through. Investors smiled politely and passed. Jason's income covered most of our living expenses, while I poured everything else into research. And I noticed something then, something I ignored. Jason didn't resent supporting me. He counted it. Every time we argued, he'd bring it up casually. "All I'm saying is, I've been carrying us for a while. You know I've been patient. I just hope this thing pays off eventually." It wasn't anger. It was a ledger. Patricia reinforced it. At family dinners, she'd sigh loudly and say things like, "Well, some people get to chase dreams while others work real jobs." Or, "Jason has always been such a provider." I learned to smile through it. I learned to swallow my irritation because I believed that when my work finally succeeded, everything would even out. I didn't see that by then, the expectations had already changed. By the time the patent sale closed, by the time $20 million hit my account, I wasn't just Jason's wife anymore. I was a solution. And that night, standing in my living room, surrounded by champagne and forced congratulations, I finally understood something chilling. The people closest to me hadn't been waiting for my success to celebrate. They had been waiting to use it. Success didn't change my life overnight. It crept in quietly, like pressure building beneath the surface. After the patent deal closed, nothing looked different from the outside. Same house, same routines, same dinners at the same table. But the air inside my marriage shifted in ways I couldn't immediately explain. Jason started watching me more. Not openly, not obviously. Just small glances when he thought I wasn't looking. Pauses when I mentioned meetings with lawyers or financial advisors. Questions that sounded casual, but landed heavy. "So, when do you actually get the money? Is it all at once or spread out? Do royalties go straight into your account or ours?" Ours. That word started showing up more often. Before, it was your project, your work, your obsession. Now it was our future, our win, our money. Patricia changed too. She called more, dropped by unannounced, asked if I needed help managing everything. She brought brochures for interior designers, real estate agents, and investment seminars she'd just happened to hear about. Once over lunch, she laughed and said, "Well, I guess you'll be taking care of the family now." I laughed too. Jason's cousin Rick reappeared around the same time. Rick had always described himself as an entrepreneur. In reality, he floated between ventures, always just one opportunity away from breaking through. He asked a lot of questions about cash flow, about timelines, about liquidity. It felt invasive. At night, lying next to Jason, I replayed conversations in my head, little moments that didn't quite fit. The way he discouraged me from updating my will immediately. The way he suggested we wait on big decisions until things settled. The way he insisted I was under too much stress and should let him handle more. "I just want to protect you," he said once, his hand resting on my arm. "You've been through so much." It sounded loving, but it felt like a warning. I started noticing how often Jason talked about worst-case scenarios. What if you burn out? What if the pressure gets to you? What if something happens to you and things aren't organized? I told myself he was anxious, that this was normal, that money makes people weird. Still, I began documenting things, not intentionally at first. Dates, conversations, Odd comments, a habit from years in engineering. When something doesn't add up, you start collecting data. The night of the party, all of that data snapped into focus. Because when your husband slips something into your drink, it's not paranoia anymore. It's confirmation. And suddenly, every strange moment before that night wasn't random. The room was buzzing with applause when I stepped forward for the toast. Everyone expected tears, gratitude, a triumphant ending. What they didn't see was the way my pulse hammered in my throat, or how carefully I kept my breathing steady as I held the champagne glass, the wrong one, lightly between my fingers. Jason stood beside me, smiling. Too calm, too confident. Patricia was front and center, as always. She wore heels so high they looked like a health risk, and clutched her designer handbag like it contained state secrets. She was already dabbing at her eyes, emotional before anything emotional had actually happened. My 14-year-old son Ryan stood off to the side near the couch, uncomfortable in the button-down shirt Jason had insisted on. He kept checking his phone, pretending he wasn't watching everything. I raised my glass. But before the speech officially began, I moved. Casually. Smoothly. I stepped toward Patricia and said, just loud enough for a few nearby guests to hear, that she deserved this celebration more than anyone. In some twisted karmic sense, it was true. I handed her my champagne glass. The chipped one, the one Jason had tampered with. She hesitated for half a second, clearly confused why I'd give her my glass instead of grabbing a fresh one. Then she smiled, deciding it was a gesture of affection. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, squeezing my hand. "You're so thoughtful." If she had known what was in that glass, she would have dropped it. We raised our flutes. Someone started talking about innovation, resilience, the American dream. Buzzwords strung together like a motivational post on LinkedIn. Jason smiled. I smiled. Patricia smiled. Well, most of us. I took the smallest sip from Patricia's glass. Normal champagne. Overpriced. Too sweet. Not deadly. Patricia, on the other hand, took a long swallow. She didn't even make it 30 seconds. One moment, she was laughing at something someone said. The next, her face went slack. Her eyes widened, not in confusion, but in panic. Her hand flew to her throat. She let out a choking gasp that cut straight through the music, and then her knees buckled. She collapsed onto my marble floor with a sound I felt in my bones. The champagne flute flew from her hand and shattered against the fireplace. Screams erupted. Someone shouted to call 911. Someone else asked if she was choking. Phones came out. Jason rushed forward, dropping to his knees beside his mother, screaming, "Mom!" over and over, with a performance that would have earned him an award if there were trophies for failed murder accomplices. Ryan stood frozen, pale, eyes locked on the scene. I stood there holding Patricia's untouched glass. Calm. Too calm. Inside my head, one thought repeated with brutal clarity. So this is happening. My husband tried to poison me at my own retirement party, and his mother drank it instead. Paramedics arrived quickly. They loaded Patricia onto a stretcher while Jason rode with her, still crying, still playing the devoted son. Guests whispered theories. Stroke, heart condition, food poisoning. No one said poison because no one saw what I saw, and I wasn't about to announce it. Not yet. Not without proof. I drove to the hospital with Ryan sitting silently in the passenger seat. He didn't ask questions. He didn't complain. He just watched me the way children do when they sense the world has shifted beneath their feet and they're trying to figure out whether the adult beside them still knows how to stand. I kept my hands steady on the steering wheel. Inside my head, everything was screaming. At Riverside General, the emergency room looked like every other ER. Harsh lights, uncomfortable chairs, people wrapped in blankets clutching paperwork. And then there was us, still dressed for a party, still smelling faintly of champagne and catered food, like we had wandered in from another reality. Jason paced. Back and forth, back and forth. He texted constantly, thumbs flying across his phone, narrating the situation to an invisible audience. Mom collapsed at the party. Doctors aren't sure what happened. Please pray. Every few minutes, he dabbed at his eyes with a tissue. I noticed something strange. I never actually saw tears. After 40 minutes, a young doctor came out holding a clipboard. Family of Patricia Newman? Jason rushed forward. The doctor explained that Patricia was stable and responding to treatment. Then her tone shifted. Careful, professional, precise. Preliminary results suggested toxic alkaloid ingestion. Not food poisoning, not a stroke, something concentrated, something fast-acting. Jason shook his head immediately. Too fast. No, nothing unusual, he said. Just champagne. His words tumbled over each other, rushed and rehearsed. People who are innocent don't answer like that. They think. They hesitate. They ask questions. People who are guilty already know what they're going to say. I stepped in calmly, mentioning that Patricia's reaction had been almost immediate, less than a minute after drinking. The doctor nodded. That matched acute poisoning. Jason froze for a fraction of a second, just long enough. Later, when he sat beside me, he placed his hand on my knee. A familiar gesture, intimate, reassuring. "I'm so glad you're here," he whispered. "I don't know what I'd do without you." That's when it fully clicked. He wasn't relieved his mother survived. He was watching me, waiting, checking my hands, my breathing, my color. He was waiting to see if I'd start shaking or collapse. I realized something terrifying in that moment. I had never been the backup plan. I had always been the target. I drove. And I didn't feel panic anymore. I felt focus. Because panic gets you killed. Documentation keeps you alive. When we got home, it was close to midnight. Jason went straight upstairs without saying goodnight. No concern, no questions, just distance. Like a man who needed time to recalibrate a plan that hadn't gone the way he expected. I locked myself in my home office. The first thing I did was pour a drink. Then I stopped. I checked the seal on the bottle, turned it under the light, twisted the cap slowly, listening for that tiny crack that proves no one's been there before. I opened it in front of my desk camera. This was my life now. A 42-year-old woman who had just sold a patent for $20 million and was inspecting her own bourbon like a crime scene. I didn't drink to relax. I drank to think. Because once the adrenaline faded, the math became obvious. People don't try to poison their spouses out of passion. They do it for profit. I logged into my accounts. The deal had closed last Tuesday. $20 million cash. Royalties locked in. The patent, legally, entirely mine. Jason's name wasn't on the LLC, not on the patent, not on a single business document, because 8 years ago, my lawyer had insisted on a prenup. I'd listened. That prenup was airtight. In a divorce, Jason would get half of what we accumulated during the marriage. The house, joint savings, maybe $60,000, possibly spousal support, but not the patent, not the $20 million, not the royalties. Unless I died, my will, the one I hadn't updated yet because the money was new, still left everything to my husband. Because that's what you do when you think you're safe. I pulled up Jason's boutique financials next. On Instagram, it looked thriving. Sold out collections, smiling customers, gratitude posts. In reality, monthly losses averaging $12,000. Rent on a retail space far too expensive. Inventory that didn't move. A social media manager billing $3,000 a month. A brand alignment consultant charging $5,000 to talk about abundance. 4 years of losses. Over $300,000. Then Patricia. 2 mortgages on a condo worth less than what she owed. A Mercedes payment she couldn't afford. Credit cards stacked like a house of cards. Even financing plans for cosmetic procedures. Debt disguised as elegance. And then there was Rick, Jason's cousin, self-proclaimed entrepreneur. In reality, a private loan shark who preyed on family members with destroyed credit. 6 months ago, I'd overheard Jason say Rick was helping with temporary bridge capital. Now I understood what that meant. Pressure. Deadlines. Interest. From their perspective, my success wasn't a miracle. It was a deadline. If I lived, they were still drowning. If I died, Jason became a grieving widower with $20 million and a clean narrative. This wasn't emotion. It was accounting. The next morning, I called my lawyer, Regina. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she said quietly, "We go on offense." Music to my ears. By that afternoon, I was undergoing a full neurocognitive assessment with an independent psychiatrist. 3 brutal hours of memory tests, logic puzzles, recall exercises. When it ended, he looked at me and said plainly, "You are fully competent." The report was notarized before sunset. That night, I slept with my door locked and cameras rolling because escalation isn't loud. It's strategic. The lowest point didn't come with screaming or violence. It came with paperwork. The next morning, Jason showed up at the kitchen table with pastries from the expensive bakery downtown, the kind he used to say was a waste of money. He placed them carefully between us, like an offering. No one brings $8 croissants unless they want something. He told me he was worried about me, about my stress, about my health, about everything I'd been carrying. Then he slid a glossy brochure across the table. Golden Birch Lifestyle Community. Palm trees, sunlit courtyards, smiling residents playing chess beside fountains. Jason spoke quickly, enthusiastically, calling it luxury assisted living. A resort with medical staff, a Michelin-trained chef, a spa. "It's not a nursing home," he said. "It's just support." I flipped through the pages slowly. Entry fee, $400,000. Monthly cost, $12,000. And there it was, buried in fine print. Power of attorney recommended for seamless care coordination. Recommended, which meant required. I felt the room tilt. This wasn't help. This was a cage. If I signed, Jason would control my finances, my medical decisions, my ability to leave. I asked calmly about the power of attorney. His smile faltered. He told me not to make this adversarial, said this was about love, about protection, about family. Then Rick chimed in, his voice soothing and false, talking about being proactive after what happened last night. That's when I said it, slowly, clearly. After last night, when your mother drank the glass that was meant for me, the silence was absolute. Jason went pale. Rick stopped mid-sentence. Jason recovered first, accusing me of paranoia, of confusion, of not thinking clearly. There it was. The pivot. I wasn't a victim. I was unstable. He told Rick this was exactly why I needed professional care. I looked at my husband, the man I had trusted with my life, and felt something inside me fracture, not heartbreak. Clarity. I told them to leave. After the door closed, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at untouched pastries, realizing how close I had come to disappearing, quietly, legally, permanently. That was my darkest moment. Not fear. The realization that love had already been weaponized against me. The turning point didn't arrive with anger. It arrived with precision. After Jason and Rick left, I didn't cry. I didn't call a friend. I didn't collapse onto the floor the way movies tell you to when your life falls apart. I called Regina. She moved fast. By that afternoon, my notarized neurocognitive assessment was finalized. 10 pages of clean, undeniable proof that I was fully competent. No confusion, no impairment, no opening for conservatorship fantasies. Then we fortified everything. Regina restructured my assets into irrevocable trusts, managed by a corporate trustee, not a person. Jason and Patricia were excluded, by name, permanently, not in divorce, not in death, not ever. Medical and financial power of attorney went to Regina and a professional fiduciary, not my husband. Fraud alerts went on every account. Cameras went everywhere. House, office, entrances, time-stamped and backed up to cloud storage I alone controlled. Then we built the trap. A single checking account. Balance, $100. It looked legitimate. It was real. It just didn't matter. Regina drafted a decoy power of attorney, a Official looking, properly formatted, carefully limited to that one account. 90-day expiration. A clause stating any overreach constituted fraud. We created a fake portfolio summary, fake balances, fake access points, and a honeypot website identical to my brokerage portal designed to log every login attempt, every action, every IP address. I placed everything neatly in a navy blue folder labeled Estate Planning, Confidential, exactly where Jason would look. That evening, I acted normal, made dinner, answered emails, sat in my office while the hidden camera recorded in 4K. Around 9, Jason appeared in the doorway. Calm, gentle, apologetic. He told me he loved me, put a hand on my shoulder, said he wanted to prove it. 30 minutes after he left, my phone buzzed. Motion detected. Home office. I opened the camera feed. Jason stood at my filing cabinet, phone out, photographing every page. Methodical, focused, greedy. Another alert followed soon after. Login attempt. Unknown iPhone. Wire transfer initiated. $4,800. Blocked. Logged. Documented. I sent everything to Regina. Her response came quickly. Beautiful. This is fraud. Do not confront him. For the first time since the party, I felt something shift. Not fear. Power. Because the truth was no longer just in my head. It was documented. And that the fall, it collapsed. Quietly, precisely, and all at once. The next morning, Jason acted as if nothing had happened. He made coffee, asked if I wanted to drive up the coast that weekend, suggested we get away and reconnect. I recognized the move instantly. Distance, isolation, no cameras, no lawyers, no witnesses. I told him maybe, said I needed to check my calendar. His smile held, but something sharp flickered behind his eyes. His timeline was slipping. By noon, Regina had contacted Detective Sarah Martinez from Financial Crimes. When Martinez arrived at my house, I handed over everything. The security footage of Jason in my office, the photos of my confidential documents on his phone, the honeypot login attempts, the blocked wire transfer, the notarized cognitive assessment, the preserved champagne bottle and chipped glass sealed in my freezer. Martinez didn't dramatize it. She listened. She took notes. And then she told me, very calmly, not to eat or drink anything I didn't personally open. Not from my husband, not from family, not from anyone. The toxicology report confirmed it days later. Aconitine. Attempted homicide. Search warrants followed. Regina suggested one final, clean end to the story. A controlled exposure. A bank meeting where Jason believed he would finally gain access using the power of attorney he thought he'd secured. Tuesday morning, he arrived with Rick and a representative from Golden Birch. Confident, smiling, ready. I signed the decoy document. Jason nodded to the banker to move $400,000. The banker typed, paused, looked up. That would be from account ending in 4821, he said, with a balance of $100. Silence. Jason's smile evaporated. That's when Detective Martinez walked in, along with the bank's fraud investigator. She thanked Jason for demonstrating intent in a recorded financial institution. Said it saved time. He tried to claim I was confused. I slid the neurocognitive report across the table. Stamped. Dated. Final. The handcuffs closed with a sound I'll never forget. That night, someone rang my doorbell. Late. A woman in a lab coat with 2 men beside her, claiming to be there for a welfare check. I didn't open the door. I called the police. They were connected to Golden Birch. At trial, the evidence spoke for itself. Jason was convicted. No contact order. No access. No narrative left to hide behind. Patricia cried in the hallway, saying I'd humiliated her. I told her I'd saved her life, and I meant it. The house is quiet now. That night, after everything was finally over, I poured myself a drink from a freshly sealed bottle. I opened it in front of the kitchen camera out of habit, then laughed quietly at myself. For the first time in months, my hands didn't shake. Ryan sat at the table, watching me the way he had that night at the hospital. Careful, thoughtful, older than he should have been. "Are you okay?" he asked. I told him yes. And this time, it was the truth. Jason is gone. The legal battles are finished. The money is protected. But more importantly, my life is my own again. I've started enjoying retirement, not as an escape, but as a choice. I wake up without dread. I work on ideas because I want to, not because I'm trying to prove something. Ryan and I talk more. We trust each other. Last week, my neighbor brought over banana bread. I accepted it without suspicion. That might be the greatest victory of all. Here's what I learned, and what I want anyone listening to this to understand. Love doesn't excuse control. Concern doesn't justify erasing someone's autonomy. And trust should never require you to ignore your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Document everything. Protect yourself legally. And don't confuse silence with safety. Sometimes the strongest revenge isn't revenge at all. It's surviving. It's living well. And it's knowing that the life you rebuilt is stronger than the one someone tried to steal from you.